Tropical Storm Julia is getting better organized as it heads towards Nicaragua. I'm Mike Naso with this Saturday morning update on the tropics. There's Julia sitting in the southwest Caribbean Sea on track very quickly for the Nicaraguan coastline. It should make landfall there in about 12 hours or so late Saturday, early Sunday morning as a hurricane, Category 1 we think. Here's the latest from the National Hurricane Center as of 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Julia was at 12.6 north, 79.9 west, winds of 65, so it's a stronger tropical storm, but is having a little bit of trouble getting vertically stacked in the atmosphere and becoming a hurricane, but it still should become a hurricane, moving west very quickly at 21, and that could be causing it to have trouble kind of catching its breath and getting better organized. Nevertheless, it should become a hurricane later today and make landfall sometime in the midnight 2 a.m. hour as a Category 1 hurricane there of about 80 to 90 miles an hour, so a high-end Category 1. I did want to mention we have a hurricane warning in effect for San Andreas, Providencia, and Santa Catalina Islands, and those are the Colombian islands right here that Julia is about to impact, and obviously on the Nicaraguan coastline from Bluefields to Puerto Cabezas, and those are the hurricane warnings. We have a hurricane watch in areas of Nicaragua north of Puerto Cabezas to the Honduras-Nicaraguan border, and we now have a tropical storm warning on the Pacific coast of Nicaragua and Honduras, as well as a tropical storm watch there along the El Salvadoran coastline, because it's looking like Julia's going to maintain itself, at least as a depression, and move into the Pacific, and we saw Bonnie earlier this year become a Category 3 hurricane moving offshore Mexico, so we'll see if Julia can survive a track into the Pacific. Here's the forecast models, and they seem to agree. A lot of them take it back over water, but thankfully it'll probably move west and away from the Mexican coastline, and we wouldn't have to deal with it beyond its landfall here in Central America. Here's the visible satellite imagery, and it doesn't look that impressive. You can see it's still kind of ragged there, and it's got a good shape to it as if it's becoming a mature hurricane, but it really has to slow down, and it's not going to become vertically stacked up in the atmosphere and to have a good, well-aligned center for development. So it's getting organized enough to become a hurricane, but certainly not a major hurricane like we saw in 1988 with Hurricane Joan, or in 2020 with Hurricanes Eta and Iota when we had to get into the Greek alphabet thing. There is still some wind shear from the northwest, but overall, I like this upper-level anticyclone over the top of it. I really think it's the fast motion, guys. I think if this thing were moving at, say, 10 miles an hour instead of 21, we'd be seeing rapid deepening into a strong hurricane. But right now, because of that fast motion, and also, even if it is strengthening, the fast motion will bring it ashore, and that will stop any strengthening and weaken it very, very quickly. Here's the radar imagery, and this is out of Providencia. This is from the Weather Channel map. And notice here on radar, it's still trying to close off an eye wall, but every time it looks like it's getting better organized, it still looks ragged, and so it's looking like it'll be a hurricane, but again, nothing major at this point in time. Here's the latest information as the hurricane, well, the tropical storm is going to become a hurricane, comes ashore in Nicaragua here for our Spanish viewers. All the information there on Julia. I wanted to note the landfall location. I put a couple of spaces here between different hurricanes. This area here near Puerto Cabezas, this is where Hurricane Eta made landfall in 2020 as a Category 4 hurricane of 145 miles an hour. Haulover down here is where Iota made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane of about, 150 miles an hour, 155? And then further south near Bluefields is where Hurricane Joan made landfall in 88 as a Category 4 hurricane. So this area is no stranger in the last 30 years or so to major hurricanes. It looks like Julia will be a much weaker hurricane, and it'll probably come ashore between Iota and Eta, somewhere here near Sandy Bay, Serpy, along that area of the coastline. And even a Category 1 hurricane, a lot of the villages there do not, they don't have building codes like we have in Florida. So a Category 1 could cause a lot more problems in Nicaragua than it would in Florida. Now, speaking of Florida, I know a lot of people are hurricane weary after Ian. You're wondering, is this thing going to pool up and do what Ian did? There's no chance of that. You can see on this water vapor imagery, we've got high pressure built into the north here, and we've got the outflow here pumping actually into this upper level feature near the Virgin Islands, giving it good ventilation, and this high pressure to the north is going to keep the storm moving straight west into the Pacific Ocean. There's virtually no chance it'll get north. If it did somehow, it would be whatever's left of it getting into the Bay of Campeche, and if it got caught by a cold front, it'd get dragged northeast and just bring some rain. But the likelihood of this being a hurricane or anything north of Honduras is very, very slim because of this high pressure. Although later on in the season, you never know. We could always get a storm coming on out in November, so you guys still need to be wary of the tropics, especially after what we've seen this hurricane season in Puerto Rico and in Florida, to say nothing of the Canadian Maritimes with Hurricane Fiona. Here's another look at the radar, and again, the rainfall is starting to impinge there along the coastline. Those Colombian islands already getting impacted, but again, it's going to be a wet night. The good news is because of the fast motion, it's not going to bury itself in Central America like Mitch did back in 1998 and cause devastating flooding, but it still could cause flooding. Heavy rainfall with any landfalling cyclone could be a threat as it slides onto the west there. Again, it looks like it's going to make landfall along this stretch of the coast, so everybody in that area, if you're watching this update, get to higher ground and shelter yourself from the winds because it's going to be a hurricane. Well, I'm Mike Naso with the latest on Tropical Storm Julia, forecast to make landfall in about 12 hours or so as a hurricane along the Nicaraguan coastline. We'll talk to you next time as we continue to track Julia into Central America.